Hey, welcome to another episode of the Unspoken Truths of Digital Leadership, Living the Leadership Values, where our guests will talk about the unspoken truths of leadership, the dark side and the learnings from dealing with conflict with integrity. Today, I have a special guest with me. It is Dai Manuel. So thank you for coming, Dai.
Hey, Jono, it's a pleasure to be here. Really, I've enjoyed the conversation we've had before we hit record. and I know that will be a sign of a great conversation that will continue. But I just love the premise of the show, specifically talking about the things that, well, to be honest, we don't create the space to talk about. Not typically. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Dai, let's talk about what is it that you do first, because you mentioned that you was the purveyor of happiness. Now, what does
Yeah.
that mean to other people?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, like we talk about titles, and I remember a period in my life I was chasing titles,
Hmm.
because I attached value to those titles. So, COO, CMO, CEO, president, like all these fancy titles, and because I put a lot of value on it, thinking that meant I made it. It meant I was successful. And not only that, I could wear this badge and say, hello, look at me, and in my 20s and my early 30s, that was definitely a driving factor for me. But over time, an interesting thing you go through, and especially for myself, I'm now 43. Whoa.
Wow.
I'm a dad of two teen girls. They're 15 and 17 years old. And I've been dating my wife for 20 years. It, that to me are the two more important titles. But it wasn't always that way, right? The family was always important, but I didn't really prioritize necessarily everything that I did based on family. And that was just something I came to a self-realization over time when I started looking at my own happiness and what was limiting my happiness. I was never satisfied going for what I believed to be successful. Like it was a constant drive. Oh, there's another title I could go for. There's another company I could go and work for or start, so I was never satisfied. And so then, you start looking at, well, what drives us? What is our purpose for being? What gets me excited? What makes me feel fulfilled at the end of the day? What's the contribution I'm making to this thing called Earth, to this humanity that we're all experiencing? And when you start actually asking yourself those questions, but more importantly, you can ask the questions, but when you take time to actually reflect on them and actually start having a dialogue with yourself about, well, what does this mean? What is it that gets me excited? I went through a period where I realized the path that I'd been on for 17 years as that COO, CMO for a company a partner and I founded, I just wasn't satisfied, wasn't happy. And I realized there was other things I wanted to do with my life. And this path was not going to provide me with the best opportunity to realize those visions, those dreams. And it's a scary place to be because I think sometimes we find ourselves, and those that are listening to this, and you may relate to this too, is you're on a path where you believe you're doing absolutely what you're meant to be doing. Like you're just like, this is it. This is what I'm on this planet to do. Like Mark Twain says, there's two most important days of our life are the day that we're born and the day we figure out why. Well,
Oh,
when I think about that is was at a point in my life where I thought I figured out why I was here. But then after some time, I realized, you know what? Maybe I've already satisfied this craving or this itch, or I checked this one box off now. Now what do I want to do? And realizing that the path that you're on is no longer going to satisfy that opportunity or bring the opportunity. It's like, whoa, what do I do? And so going through that process, and this is just over 5 years ago, I left that company and exited out and started going down a new path. And so this is a long-winded answer of saying, yeah, I used to be somebody very different. I used to have different ideals and different expectations and different desires in life. And the last 5 years, I've been doing something completely different, and I'm enjoying it a lot. But the one title that's been consistent at every phase of my life is a dad, and I'm proudly married to my wife, my best friend. Like those are things that are constant. Those aren't going to change, like the title on a business card. So, sorry, a loaded answer for a simple question like, "Hey, what is your, what do people call you?" And I'm like, I wish it was an easier answer, but
no, but I
yeah.
love it because I resonate so much with your path. I feel like I'm you, but like 20 years behind.
Oh,
I'm
well, that's all
literally
good. You're going to
following
catch up quicker then.
I'm literally following your footsteps. I'm like I'm with my partner for my fiance for about
Mhm.
10 years now, just over
Oh,
10
amazing.
years. We got
Amazing.
engaged just in February.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you very much.
exciting.
And so, yeah, my next steps was, but also in my career path was I was
Mm.
working towards this, for Asian families and people, our
Hmm.
expectations in the family is if you're not a doctor, lawyer, and accountant, you're not counted as successful.
Wow.
And that's the pressure that we live in, the stereotypical generation that my generation
Mm.
lives in anyway, at least the 80s, 90s,
Hmm.
is usually if you're not a doctor, lawyer, and accountant,
Wow.
you're not really counted as successful to the parent side. But for the next, that's closer to
Hmm.
success, is you're working in a corporate company.
Mm.
So
Right.
I was chasing titles and I was working my way up. I worked from startups to SMEs
Mm.
to bigger companies and then to corporate, where I was earning the corporate salary, and I thought I
Yeah.
was like, I made it. This is it. I'm good. Only to find out that I wasn't happy.
Right. Right.
And this is where you saying, "Are you happy?" And I was just like, "No." That's the point where I got to it. I was like, "What next?" Like, I made it. I'm in corporate. I've climbed the ladder. I'm still
Yeah.
climbing, but do I want to keep climbing up that ladder to become the manager of that corporation, then to be whatever next titles were,
Scary,
and it,
isn't it?
and
Oh.
I wasn't. Yeah, it was. It actually took me 8 months to realize it wasn't what I wanted.
Mm. Hmm.
I could have stayed there for longer, but it took me 8 months to realize I'm not happy. My
What
health
was the
is
first thing you did when you started to realize that the path you
well.
were on wasn't providing you the happiness that you were expecting? Right? It's that sort of realization. It's like, yeah, and I don't think this path's going to bring me that happiness that I want.
The, the realization was I was mentally and physically burnt out.
Mm. Right.
So
Yeah.
that was the sign of, is this what you want to do for the next 20, 30 years of your life in corporate?
Right.
And when that became, like Steve Jobs says, when the answer becomes no too many times,
Mm.
it's a sign to just stop and just do something else.
Yes.
And so I was just like, no, this is not what I'm doing. I'm going to just give it up and find something else I want to do. So that's when I went on a pursuit to discover my truth and discover
Mm.
what is it that I'm here to do and create.
Hmm.
So that's why I kept, when you was talking about your story, I'm just in there.
You're in the weeds, as I say. Like
Yeah.
we're there. We're slugging through it. And for those that are listening, I think this is a more and more common thing that many people are encountering today, and especially with the prevalence of the gig economy. I think we have more choices now than we've ever
Mm.
had to
Yeah.
literally dabble in different things, just really just test it, right? Try different things. And especially like even network marketing, like I think it's just a wonderful business model. It gives people a great opportunity to test their flair at entrepreneurship, right? With a very low risk.
Yeah. Because
And
don't have
yeah,
to manage stock, you'd have to manage the sales or customer
exactly.
service.
Ah,
But yeah,
it's
there's
wild. Like, we're in a great age, where we do have choices. We're not limited where we used to think, 40 years, 40 hours a week. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And then I can retire. And then, whatever happens after that, I'm like, no way. I'm not falling into that trap, you know? But not to
so
speak negatively of it, of course, for those that are listening to it. But if that doesn't satisfy you and doesn't make you feel happy or on purpose, don't be afraid to challenge it, because maybe that path is meant to change. That's all. That's it. That's what I want to say about
it's not just
that.
network marketing, it's like e-commerce, drop
Mm.
shipping and
Yeah.
affiliate marketing. It's all sorts now, isn't there? There's just
Yeah.
so many things you could do. You could be a YouTuber. Like, what's that? What's that 10
Incredible.
years ago, right?
It's wild. We do. We have more choices than I think we know what to do with, and sometimes it can be decision fatigue, right? Like literally, we do have too many choices at times, and that is very true. Especially you end up on an Amazon, website or marketplace. It's like, oh my gosh, I just wanted this one little thing. Like I came on to buy some spices, and now my cart's full of $150 of the stuff I didn't expect to buy. Right? It's like going to Costco. It's just too many choices, and that fear of missing out. Sometimes it can be very paralyzing, and
Mm.
or we make too many commitments. We say yes to too many things, and that also limits just our quality of life in many ways, right? So it's interesting when you start to recognize these patterns within us and some of the things that we do, which we think are good in the moment, and then very quickly the things start to compound in a negative way, and it encroaches on some of the other things that we prioritize. Like for myself, it was like all of a sudden, I started saying yes to a bunch of things, and now this family time that I wanted to prioritize again, oh, I have less of that time now because I've been saying yes to some of these other opportunities that have been coming my way because I've got all this extra time because I've exited away from what was a career path to something new. And so it's interesting. You start to recognize these patterns. For me, it was just, I say yes way too much, way too much. Yeah.
How do you deal with those kind of opportunities when it gets too much, overwhelming, and the tension and the time that takes away from the things you have to sacrifice for?
Well, I think it's recognizing if we have that tendency or not, first and foremost. Like, so becoming mindful that I had the habit of saying yes and then trying to figure out how to deliver on that yes after the fact. It's like, I'll just say yes and I'll figure it out after. It'll be okay. And what I started to realize is that I was saying yes to so many things that all of a sudden I had too many balls in the air, too many things to juggle, too many commitments, and not only other people I've made commitments to, but also to myself, but also to my family. Because if I say a commitment to somebody outside my family, well, that's time and energy and resources to some extent, and I only have so much to go around. And I relate to self-care and the idea of self-care. I have yet to find a job where someone's saying, Dai, I'm going to employ you and I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, and all I want you to do is love yourself. Are you okay with that? And I would be like, yes, I'm okay with that. Whatever you want to pay me, I will do it. But it's not how careers typically work. We have to prioritize time for our self-care because nobody else will, and when you understand that, you talked about experiencing burnout, right? And the fatigue that you get from when you would get to that point. Sometimes it takes a long time to bounce back from that. I was hospitalized with burnout at one point, and it was crazy because my body started to shut down. Like my immune system became heavily compromised, and my nervous system, and all just based on way too much stress, and so it's recognizing these patterns. And if we have the patterns, then we can at least start to tweak them, change them. And that's what I had to do in my case. And I was very fortunate. I also had a mentor of mine recommend a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And it really hits the nail on the head, as the cliche goes, because the main purpose of the book is, really helping us recognize what is a yes versus what is a no. No more maybes, no more of these sort of 50-50 conversations like, oh, I'll think about that, but I'll get back to you on it. Because all we're doing now is occupying that future mental space, right? Now we're taking that rock and we're putting it in our backpack, and it just keeps getting heavier and heavier with these future liabilities, which is a time liability, right? Because you've made a commitment, yet we're not following through on it. And I don't know about you, but for me, from an integral standpoint, that drives me nuts. It makes me feel really bad about myself if I'm not living into integrity. So if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to follow through on that. And when that doesn't happen, it makes me feel bad. And when I'm feeling bad, I tend to do other things to try to make me feel better in the moment. And sometimes those things aren't very healthy. I used to use alcohol, like a lot, to deal with that stress and that anxiety, that sadness, that depression. And, it wasn't until I really recognized that pattern was getting worse that I was able to make a change. And basically for me, it was like I committed to 1 year of no drinking, and it's now turned into over 10 years. Wow, because a lifestyle ensued. Well, and I don't say that to brag, but for me at the time, I thought it was a pretty big deal, because of the amount I was drinking, and it just became this regular way of dealing with stress. Was I'd have a couple drinks at the end of the day, right? And it would lead to other decisions, which weren't great. My health was suffering, my happiness was suffering, my relationships with my family and professionally were suffering. So I was like, oh, I can do this without a year. And then I got through that year, and whoa, so much mental space opened up. I became far less stressed. That backpack I was talking about felt way lighter because I was also a lot more clear in how I made my decisions, because I had all this extra energy and focus and flow by removing that one little crutch, just taking that one little thing away. Wasn't easy, but I let everybody know it was worth it, and so I share that story only because many of us have certain crutches or habits that we do, and we do on the regular, because it does give us a bit of temporary relief to whatever might be creating stress or anxiety or sadness in our life. We're always, forget the pleasure delayer, right? That we're more about instant gratification nowadays, especially. I'm guilty of this, like, why put off till tomorrow what I can have right now? Oh, let's put this on a credit card. I don't even have the money for it, but that's okay. I'll pay for it later, right? We mortgage our future to pay for right now. And, but we do this with our emotions all the time, and so as soon as you find out that you're doing that, well, great. Now I'm aware of it. What can I do to start changing this? And that's where there's great podcasts like what you're producing here. There's amazing books. There's great TED Talks. I mean, we have endless supply of information. But unless you know you've got something in you that you want to change, like you said, Steve Jobs, look in the mirror every morning. Am I about to do something that I actually want to be doing today? And if the answer is no, too many days in a row, I know it's time to change. Well, it's time to change. So what do? Well, you start making some changes. And people are like, oh, is it that simple? I'm like, yeah, yes, it is. I'm not saying simple should be confused with easy, though. And I think that's why we're challenged to sustain the change, right? Because it takes time. You've been studying neuroplasticity, right? Like it takes a long time to rewire our brain to do something new and to do it well. And yeah, anyways, sorry, I go off on these tangents sometimes because I get all excited. It's like seeing flashing lights, right? I just get attracted to them. But
I love
anyways,
it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Because the thing is, not many, you talk about, it's not easy to change, but there's people, are people willing to change? Just are they willing to recognize it and change? I think it's one of the most sticky points.
Right.
As you work with your clients and I have with mine, is that when people go, oh, you need to change things, people are like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, yeah. but you want results, right? It's like, yeah, I want results. So you have to change something. You need to change your approach. You need to do something else. You need to tweak something, like you said, tweak something, even if it's a small thing. But the thing is with tension and stress, and this is what my mentor always says as well, is every time we do any sort of self-awareness training or super consciousness training and those things, or just going within, he says, because those trainings normally last 3 to 5 days or to 7 days, sometimes even 10 days in a row, where we're just in a secluded environment, we're away from everything else, we have no mobiles. We train in South Africa, so it was just like disconnected from the world. You're in this safari little park of a few houses, few huts. All we do is just go on safari trips and then come back and eat and then train and go through within on topics and meditation and all those. But he says no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes, no anything that contaminates your body. Is it no sex, no drugs, no alcohol? Because those are things that release tension or stress, or like an instant gratification kind of thing. Like it's like a thing that changes your body, doesn't it? Because it's got so many things in it that does it.
Definitely. Well, I think about even my Vipassana experience. 10 days silent meditation, right? Again, it's just that they're trying to emulate what Buddha would have experienced, and you think about it, if you were a monk and you had to live off the goodness of others, well, you wouldn't have access to food. You may not have a roof over your head. You would not have a mobile phone or even a writing utensil for that matter. And because you're right, it was all about these certain external factors and turning all the focus inward. But trying to create that environment that he would have experienced when he experienced enlightenment, right? Through his meditation style, which is Vipassana. And I'm more of a non-secular approach, obviously, not necessarily the Buddhist doctrines, but I do see a lot of value in that, especially when you look at modern day psychology, right? Like there's certain aspects that we can pull from what Buddha was talking about 2,500 years ago. It's still very relevant now. You got guys like Eckhart Tolle, right? Anthony Robbins, most likely your mentor from what you just shared. This idea of change, everything's changing. Nothing stays the same. Nothing. Not a single thing. You cannot count on anything to stay exactly as it is right now. You just can't. And the more you try to, the more opportunity we create for suffering, for unhappiness, for disappointment. and limiting ultimately our happiness, right? Our sense of joy and fulfillment and purpose. And so going through that process of really turning that focus inward for a fixed period of time, it was, to pardon the pun, enlightening. It was also one of the most challenging things I've ever done. As I can imagine, your safari, these retreats that you go on, it's tough because you're going out of your environment of comfort into a completely different environment with different conditions, and all to try to create a certain opportunity for you to go inward, go on that inward journey, and recognize some of the things that we want to change. And I think it's a beautiful experience, but it was also easily one of my most challenging ones.
How did you manage your team? Like when you was CMO or CEO, and how many people did you manage, like in your company?
Well, at one point, with all contractors, that was over 100. And that's with contractors, but actual full-time people, probably in 60s, 70s, about that. And, at the time, especially, I was really young, right? My business partner was 20 years my senior, also really my business mentor, my first real significant business mentor, and life mentor to an extent as well, because he was 20 years my senior, right? So I'm just like, okay, well, I want to be where you are in 20 years, And then after working together for 17 years, I was like, kind of want my own path, but it took me some time to figure that out. Right. But I also recognized I was pretty young and pretty ambitious, and I was also just hungry, to learn, to improve, to progress, to, as I told you, I was chasing certain titles too. Right. And the things that came along with the titles as well, like respect, like, well, of course, the money, the opportunity to have the homes or the vehicles, and, just the stuff. And so as I started to mature, as I started to focus a lot more of the attention inward and on myself and my own personal development, it then also fed into my professional development. And I started to become a more effective leader. And that's also actually, we talked about Toastmasters, just a little sidebar. I had a mentor. I saw him speak. I was part of a mastermind group, and we would often every month have a guest speaker come in. And so we invited this guy to come in to talk about communication. And he's a keynote speaker and just very polished. He just commanded the room, and there's a bunch of us that are all like late 20s, early 30s. And, this guy's like in his 50s, gray hair, tall guy, really slick. But just as soon as he opened his mouth and started talking, we were all like, whoa, this guy's awesome. Like it just, what it's like when you see a really good speaker, you're just like mesmerized, right? And you absorb it all. You're learning, you're there, you're experiencing the moment. And after he finished, 40 minutes later, I went up and I talked to him. I said, what do I got to do to be like you? What do I need to do? Because also at the time I was still dealing with, moving up my own company and having now more responsibility, having to direct more people. And I used to deal with social anxiety to some extent. I was naturally very introverted, and yet I would very often be put in a position to be more extroverted based on my role. And so I would often bounce back and forth, but I found it really hard to be extroverted. It took a lot of energy, and it would often take me lots of time to recover after the fact. I'd have to basically unplug for a couple of days, to try to, and it's still, even when I do keynotes today, I need a couple of days afterwards just to decompress and to get grounded again. Cause it's a completely different energy. Right. And, so he basically says to me, he goes, well, Toastmasters. And I was like, what is that? I hadn't even heard of it. I didn't even know, this is 2008 at the time. And, I went home. That was a Friday afternoon. I went home, looked up online. I said, Toastmasters, where I was living, that little town, came to the locator, found one that starts Monday mornings. They do 6:30 a.m. It was an early edition club. And I went and started that Monday. So literally like 3 days later, I was at my first Toastmasters meeting, and, I've been on and off going now for 12, almost 13 years. And,
that's amazing.
It changed how I looked at things, especially from a personal and professional development, from a leadership standpoint. You were mentioning you're an area director now. I mean, you're overseeing a number of clubs. There's a lot of people there that you're now there to support and help. And you learn. And because it's all volunteer driven, right? Like it's nonprofit. No one's paid to be there. So you have to get really good at leadership, because it's not the typical ways that leadership, I'll pay you more so I can yell more at you. Like that's corporate, right? Like I pay well, but I also yell. And so it was a different structure and something that I was not used to. But it helped me so much, even in my own business, but specifically personally, and how I communicated, how I saw myself, how I would tell a story. I mean, just everything. And so I always tell people this: if you're interested in personal and professional development, one of the best places to go is Toastmasters. It's global. You know, I'm not being paid for this. I'm not affiliated with them other than I'm a member since 2008. But because it's nonprofit, I always tell people, treat it like a $10,000 a year investment. If you treat it like that, you're going to get way more value from it. And that's the only negative I have about Toastmasters is it's too cheap.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree with that one because it's undervalued for what it could do for you. There's immense of opportunities of learning and development that people don't see because of the price point.
It's true.
But that's how I see it anyway. Because you and I both have invested probably thousands of dollars and pounds into our own education. Money just compared to Toastmasters, what we have to pay for Toastmasters, it's just like it's not tiny little fraction. But what we get out of it is much more rewarding because of the learnings and development that comes out of the roles, just from feedback, evaluations and things that you could take away and implement into your life literally almost instantly, right?
It really does. If you wanted to,
after every meeting you could just go away and go, I learned something new, or just I learned another way of doing something better or giving feedback better. That is just anyway. Let's go back to.
I agree. It's pretty amazing. So,
how did you go into the path of business? I mean, not everyone else is chasing titles and stuff, but I see loads of people who's in the high performance arena or just wanting to make a difference or start a business. Where did you start off from?
Well, I really enjoyed health and fitness and lifestyle, and I got into fitness, specifically like I went through my own transformation as a teenager. I was morbidly obese as a teen until about the age of 14 and a half, and then I just made some lifestyle changes, and that literally involved me educating myself on how to get healthy. What kind of food should I be eating? When should I be eating them? How should I move my body? Just the basic questions, right? Just trying to have a good understanding, because I didn't play sports. I didn't do any team stuff. I even avoided phys ed class because when you're in that state of unhealth, I didn't want to be in any of those situations. It was like a foreign language to me. I felt very uncomfortable, very intimidated, and very withdrawn. And which also, mental health wise, at the time I was depressed and I had a lot of other issues that were complications of how I was feeling. And I realized, well, there's only one person that can help me with this change. My parents can support me with it, but they can't do it. I've got to do it. And so away I went, and it took almost 2 years to realize the changes. But going through that process, I just became very excited about mentorship and coaching and helping others, because people started to ask me questions. They saw me have this massive transformation, and they started asking, well, I want to lose some weight. Can you help me? Can you tell me how to do this? Like, what should I eat? And just, that was the first time in my life that people came to me asking me for my advice and help to achieve something. And, it's really nice. It's that great feeling to be able to give back and to help others. Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey, right? And it's just that you go on this hero's journey, you encounter these dragons and these crazy challenges and epic quests, and you overcome them, and you evolve as a result. And then what do? You go back to where you started the journey. Now you want to help others have the similar experience, right? Yes. And so that was very much what I was finding. And the interesting thing was I really had a hard time monetizing it because I just loved doing it. I felt bad charging people. And a lot of trainers deal with this all the time. But I was fortunate. I went to buy some fitness equipment at a specialty fitness store, which was brand new to me. I had no idea that these kind of stores even existed, but it was a store that only sold fitness stuff. And so I went in and got to talking to the manager who was helping me out, and we hit it off. And they're like, what do you think about working here? And I was like, really? Well, this sounds pretty cool. I'd like to learn more. And then I learned that it was a commissioned sales position. I've never been in something like that. And anybody that's worked in sales or, entrepreneurs know this, because the more people you serve and the more impact you make in other people's lives, the more money you make. I was like, this is cool. So the more people I help, you're telling me the more money you're going to pay me. And they're like, yeah. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm in. And very quickly, like within a year, I was already managing one of their larger stores. This was a national chain in Canada at the time. And I moved up really quickly. And fortunately, the business partner that was their joint venture partner for Western Canada took me under his wing. This is my first business partner. And then we separated from that national chain and went off on our own. Wow. And it was an amazing opportunity, and I learned a tremendous amount and a lot of success. You know, we grew it from 1 location to 8, and a couple of B2B enterprises, e-commerce all across Canada. You know, we grew it to 8 figures a year, and it was amazing. I learned so much. But yeah, I also knew after 17 years of doing that, there was time for a change. You know, I really wanted to make a change, and wrote a book, quit my career, wife quit hers. We pulled the kids out of school a few months after that. Like literally within 6 months of leaving my career, we were traveling as a family.
Wow.
And
Where did you go first?
yeah, it was wild, man. It was pretty cool. But
what was your first destination?
Well, we went south. You know, we're in Vancouver. It was January. We're like, wow, we're going to chase the sun because it's pretty cold here and it's wet and rainy. And if you're familiar with Seattle, same way. London, like the weather is almost the same as Vancouver, you know, with the exception, I think our summers are a little bit nicer here, but I'm a bit biased. But
I agree. I think I agree with that one. But we do have 30s this week.
Oh, that is really good. That's
really
not a usual thing. That's
it's like
good.
They said it was like as hot as Barbados.
Wow. That doesn't happen. You enjoy
it doesn't happen
happens,
that yeah. It's this week was like, okay, that's different.
Oh.
Especially now we're still, you know, in the situation is most people are still quarantined, staying home.
Yeah.
It's like, but, you know, we can still go out, but you know, it's limitations and stuff. You know, but yeah.
It's wild. So we traveled around North America for the first couple of years, and then we eventually went overseas, and we lived in Bali predominantly for the last I was there 2.5 years. My family was there for 2 years.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and so it's nice. And then we just relocated back to Vancouver. I did in January. They came back late 2019 for my kids to go back into high school. That's why we came back, because now they're at those final years of high school. And if they have the desire, like one of my daughters does, to go post-secondary, it's much easier to do that, you know, because we're from Vancouver, we're Canadian. It's easier for us to do it within the education system here rather than doing international schooling. Yeah. So, and they wanted to experience, you know, high school with their friends and back home. So we wanted to honor that. So for the next few years, we're in Vancouver again, and sort of figuring things out as we go. That's about it. But that's how I got into business. Sorry, it was, and then entrepreneurship. I've naturally had other businesses, and you know, still do some consulting work, some coaching, some mentorship, and I have some online courses, and I've monetized my platform. So I do a lot of different stuff online and speak professionally now as well, which was something that I wanted to do. And without Toastmasters, I couldn't have done it.
Wow. It's a lot of credit to Toastmasters, isn't it?
Tons. Like you get out of it what you put into it. That's the bottom line. You know,
I do agree with that one as well. Definitely. I found that on my own journey is just, you get in what you put in with Toastmasters. I mean, like, we don't get paid for it, but the amount of work we put in for ourselves makes the difference. I think that's the point is, you know, the amount of action we take outside of, you know, Toastmasters, but with the skills that we pick up.
Oh, it's pretty cool, you know, and so you know, life's a journey, and it's a beautiful journey at that. Do I know where the next few years are going? Not necessarily, but I'm doing things that I enjoy. I have time with family, time with friends, and obviously we're all dealing with a bit of a different situation right now with what's going on, around the world with this pandemic. But the world's slowly starting to open up again, you know, and we're adapting, we're adjusting. So do I know where I'll be a year from now? Well, probably in Vancouver. Do I know doing what? Not 100%. Probably something similar to what I'm doing now, but I'm okay with the change. Do you know what I mean? Like if that makes sense.
I love that because it just reminds me of what Michael Jordan said in the documentary. He's like, what are you creating in the future? He goes, I don't know. I'm too busy enjoying the moment or the present.
Totally.
And I was just like, wow, that was huge a minute ago. It's just like, that is powerful. It is enjoying the moment. Like, why do we need to worry so much about the future when we could be now enjoying the now?
That's right.
And really enjoying the present and what we're creating now. So, yeah, that's really powerful.
Well, thank you. I wasn't even realizing I was saying it, but yes, I am trying to be much more aware of right now. And I do agree that it's amazing what we can achieve right now when we're aware of it, right? But also, I think it's kind of neat because it it shows us that it doesn't have to be as complicated as we usually make it. Do you know what I mean? Like I usually find when I start to really look at things, and maybe this is more the stoicism, right? That stoic sort of outlook on life, and when you start to try to be more realistic or pragmatic with where you're at given the moments, and what's a real pressure versus a made up pressure. You know, I start looking at things, and I know when this whole pandemic started, I had a lot of fear. You know, I had a lot of contracts and clients that their businesses had been decimated, like literally overnight. So I can't realistically be there and say, well, continue to pay me to help you because I know exactly how to get through this pandemic. I don't know that. Give me a break. I have no idea. I can't, who am I to say that? And so my business was also, as a result, heavily affected. And you know, your mind just makes up all these things, all these possible situations. And when you realize that you have that tendency, like I do, you can start to deal with it.
We all do.
Well, I think we all do. But then you sit down and you ask yourself, well, what's really the worst thing that can happen right now, given the situation I'm finding myself? What is the most important thing? Well, we're healthy, we're safe, we have food, we have a roof over our head. Okay, so I think we've got the basics here. You know, when you start talking Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, we got the first few covered. We're okay here. We're okay. It's safe. And then you start to work through some of the other layers. And yeah, there's some nuances there that you got to sort of address, and things are going to be different. But when you look at the core values and the things that really you prioritize as being the most important, like for me, it was my family's health and safety, you know, my own health and safety, like feeling that we're going to be fed, you know, we're going to have food, we're going to have a roof over it, like just basic necessities. And I feel for people that they've been challenged on those basics. You know, I get it. I mean, knock on wood, I've never found myself in that situation. So I can't truly empathize from a perspective of truly experiencing myself, but I can empathize with the situation just in my own mind. And I can only imagine how horrible that is. And so, you know, I do recognize that I'm very grateful every day for my situation. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's one thing I've really allowed myself is to create more space for gratitude. And also to help others. I don't know about you, but you know, even you producing this content is great. And I've seen a lot of great content out there online right now. People just trying to help others, you know, support them mentally with mental health and even physical health. The amount of free workouts that you can plug into online now is like crazy. It's like
every day for me.
Yeah, isn't it cool though? It's like I love it. You can do something different every day.
I just find a different personal trainer every day. It's just like do a different workout.
I love it. Like I think it's great, and I think people are we're learning how to adapt, you know, again, and we're in a situation where we have to adapt. But I've been really quite happy seeing that there's lots of communities coming to support each other, you know, especially like I'm in some Facebook communities and seeing some of the conversations that are happening between members and how they're showing up to support each other, even if just to be heard. Right. Like I have a men's group that we started in Bali that we continue to run online, and but we also have a Toronto group and a Vancouver group. So really a specific time, Eastern time, and then Bali time. And but the cool thing with this men's group is just men coming together once a week for mentorship, for community, for camaraderie, for support, having a space where you don't have to fear judgment. You know, as men, I know for myself, I was guilty of this. And for the men that are listening to this, I don't know if you're nodding your head or not, but you might relate to this, where I used to look at other men as competition. You know, every guy was a competitor. Oh, you know, like, and it was just, I found it really hard to authentically celebrate the victories in their lives. You know, they would talk about, you know, hitting new sales records, even in some of my masterminds, be like, oh, sheesh. Why him? Why not me? You know, like the voices in our head, and we just so quickly to cast judgment. I was quickly, and so to have a space where that's not encouraged. In fact, we're openly there to support each other and to celebrate each other, but also console one another when appropriate. And it's neat when you have that kind of an environment. So I always tell guys, you know, look into men's groups wherever you live. I bet you there are some, and just getting around those men is a good thing. It's a really good thing, and professionally, but specifically personally. And so that's been a big piece of what's helped me navigate the whole COVID issue, specifically. Just knowing I have this great community of guys I can connect with once a week, and just be like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. The sky is falling, but here's how we can support each other. Here's how we can get through this. And,
that's fantastic.
Yeah. Anyways, just a little sidebar. Sorry.
No, that's cool because I was gonna ask you was how are you dealing with this current
Mm,
situation, but you just it was
that
so
was it.
yeah, that was it. That's just amazing because the thing is, guys or men, we don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk
Yeah,
about the challenges. Especially to our family or our spouse or partner, and we just want to keep things closed. And we think, oh yeah, everything's fine, even if it's burning down in within.
that's right.
We just go, it's fine. Like even if it's not, right? That's what we tend to say. We always say
Yeah,
we go, it's cool. We got it covered. But within we're just like panicking
it's true.
in
Yeah.
uncertainty and just like paddling like mad. It's like I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm going somewhere.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we feel like just by moving, we're doing something. And I guess it depends. You know, as you think about it from a fitness standpoint, yeah, moving's good. You're burning calories.
Yeah.
But it really depends. You know, that's why it is nice to have a purpose, right? Or at least have a vision or a goal that you're aiming towards, because then at least you feel like you're going in the right direction. You know, it's like we know the sun rises over here and it sets over there. Okay, well, we can use those points to guide us in the right direction. If you want to go west, well, we know go to the west. This is west. You want to go east? This is east. It's nice having those guides. And in our life, it's nice to have those guides as well. But sometimes it takes time to figure it out and to really find the one that truly resonates with us and feels right. I know for myself, I used to want things so quickly. I wanted to know what I needed to know now to start creating the results. Like I had no patience, right? And no grace for myself to even give myself the space to just learn as I go. And that was something I really wanted to embrace over this last 5 years, especially leaving where I came from. I knew it was
Mm.
that next natural evolution. And I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I trusted that there would be a process and, you know, trusted enough in myself as well. Right. Like just, and I think we have the ability in us. It's almost a cliche now. It's like everything that we know is already within us, right? Like they sort of reference that often in a lot of the books, a lot of the teachings, and I do believe that to a certain extent, it is absolutely true, right? And but it doesn't mean the answers come easily.
No, because they whisper.
They do.
Because that's
So true.
that
Mm.
voice is or within is normally the intuition, what people say, or what
Yes.
the spiritual or self
Mm.
awareness or that realm of work is. They call it the intuition that we all have it, but it's being able to access and trust what it says.
Mm.
Because most oftentimes it'll ping up with something you're like, really?
Yeah.
That is way either beyond what you're thinking or what you made sense of. It doesn't make sense. And you're like,
Yeah,
why would I do that? Why would I want to
for
do
sure.
that? But that is usually the case of that's what you need to do.
Yeah. So true, right? So true. But the night, just for anybody that's listening to this, just to sort of summarize, like it's perfectly okay to feel overwhelmed. Like it's not, and it's easy for me to say that only because I've experienced that state so many times now, and because also from the anxiety piece, like it's always there. I've just learned how to manage it. Right.
Mm.
And it's like, well, I tell people all the time, it's like, well, when you speak in front of these large groups and organizations, did you get nervous? I'm like, yeah. Are you afraid? Yeah. My palms are sweating, my heart rate's racing, I'm starting to, my voice is cracking. Like, yeah. But I've put a lot of time in that state to be able to now recognize that this is what's happening. This is what I'm experiencing. It's going to be okay. I'm not going to die. And I can start to channel that nervousness into a positive energy, a
Mm.
positive force. And all it is really a redirection. I often refer to this sort of like the Aikido method of public speaking, right? Like we learn how to take that energy, but use it now and really redirect it in a much more positive light. I'm not eliminating it. I'm not denying it. I'm accepting it, but now repurposing it to help me. And anybody can learn to do this. Anybody can. And in fact, I would challenge that I think everybody does it to a certain level, whether they're aware of it or they're not. That's a completely different question. But I think we do have that ability, but it takes practice and you got to repeat it. It's not just a one and done kind of situation. Unless I only want to do one talk and then I'll never do it again. That's not the case. I want to keep making an impact. So I want to keep doing it. So you know what? I'm going to keep experiencing that. And it gets a little bit easier every time. you know, and but I know that one thing that I've learned through that one experience is repeatable. And that is what I wanted to leave on, is like everything is repeatable and you learn through repetition. It's not always the most effective way of learning, but you learn and it's okay. And that's why mentorship, coaches, like, gosh, there's so much amazing info out there. Just dive in, man. Dive in.
But that's the making the conscious decision to serve, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially on stage. I mean, we can easily get into our own heads and just let our minds take over and be like, oh, stuck, don't know what to say, I lost my speech, or less train of thought. Like, do you just stop speaking? No, you're here to serve. You're there to serve. Keep serving. Like, as long as you keep channeling that energy, like you said, reflecting, directing,
yes,
I'm here to give back. Whether it's going to make sense or not, it doesn't matter. I'm going to just speak.
For sure.
And
speak
usually,
honestly and truthfully, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes out. Your truth comes out, and it just shows. So, I think that's powerful. Thank you for that.
Oh, thanks.
So, I'm aware of the time.
Yeah. Gets going pretty quick.
I know. I was just like getting to the flow of this conversation. But,
Einstein would have something to say about that, but yeah, it's all good.
It's been insightful. It's been very, very helpful. How would people, if anyone wants to connect with you, where can they go?
Oh, well, one saving grace is my parents gave me a very unique name. And Dai is a Welsh name for David. Manuel is Portuguese. So I've got a Welsh first name, Portuguese last name, very unique. I haven't seen that combination before. And thankfully, you know, they were visionaries because I'm older than Google, as I tell my kids. And then there was this thing called search engine optimization. And my name is very searchable. So if you look for my name on any search engine, you're going to find me. But more specifically, any social media platform, it was the least encumbered name I could get as a handle. And so just my name. But I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook. So I always tell people, if you want to message me there. I will get back to you. I'm a bit of a lone wolf that way. Like, it's just me. I don't have a team of people that are going to respond back to you or manage my social. I do all that myself because I like to form relationships with people. I like to have real conversations. So I always tell people, just even if you send me a message, hey, Dai, how you doing? I heard you on a podcast. Great. Oh, awesome. Yes, I loved you on the show. It's great. That is simple. That's how we start a conversation, right? Like, that's
one thing I struggled was messaging people to come onto the show. Yeah. I was like, why don't I just be personal and make them a video and invite them to come on and things like that? I know so you found me, but there was other ways that I was inviting other people. Was like, I made a video to reach out and say, hey, would you like, I'm working on a new project, new podcast show. Would you like to come on? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. When's the best time? I'm just like, whoa, like these guys are like big entrepreneurs. And I was making that mistake because I was comparing. Like, these guys are doing way bigger things than me. Why would they want to come on my show? Yeah. I was just like, I said, forget it. Just like, I'm going to just say, the worst they can say is just, no, I haven't got the time for you.
Right. It's true.
Next time.
It's true. Well, no, but yeah, you're right. But if you don't ask, it never happens. Yeah. Right.
So I'm glad.
I love that you do that, though. I think that personal touch is so, well, there's not enough people doing it, to be honest. And that's why you'll stand out. That's why you've achieved what you've achieved. You've gone and created it. You didn't wait for it to happen. Right. Like, I think that's the thing, is that taking action, implementation, doing and it also it leads to a certain state of being, right? Like, when you're in that flow, you're just being that. It's not a matter of thinking like, oh, I need to be this way. It's just, no, that's just who you are. And but through repetition, right? Isn't it? Like, at least I find for myself, I develop these new habits only because I keep repeating them. And I like to let people know that, it's just like, yeah, I'm 43 years in the making. Like, remember that this didn't happen overnight. My friends often joke, like, last year I did 12 keynotes. I averaged one a month. That's a lot of talking. And they're like, on average, 75 minutes. Like, it's a lot of storytelling. And you got to capture an audience and keep them going for that long, right? And I'm only bringing this up because I have a friend. He's like, wow, man, you're doing really well. And his perception, and some people's perception, oh, you're a very successful speaker now. I'm like, well, no, it's 13 years. Not a success overnight, but 13-year overnight success, right? Like, it's a lot of repetition,
but people don't see that.
Feedback, a lot of me tripping, and I still trip. man, I remember doing this one keynote and I swear everybody was falling asleep. And I was like, what is going on here? Usually people are great with this, but they put me on at the very end of the day after a big fatty dinner, right? Like a big calorie dinner, like a buffet style. And I was like, people are falling asleep because like they've also been drinking wine. I'm like, oh, this is just not a good time for me. But you just go on, you do what you do, right? And fortunately, there were some people that were paying attention, so I focused on them. You know?
That's it.
But whatever, it happens, you know, and it's good. I learned, you know. But anyways, I keep rambling. Thank you. Dai Manuel is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dai. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. It's been so insightful as well. I had massive learnings from this, just myself.
Well, I want to thank you for putting this together and for holding the space for people to come on and to share these unspoken truths. Because as we said before we hit record, these are often the stories that actually give us the greatest insights on change and what is potential, and also makes us realize we're all human, right? It's just some of us have made a few more mistakes than the others because we've tried a few more times. It just means we're on a different state of that journey, and we're all on it, and we're all on it together. And yeah, anyways, I'm looking forward to our next conversation, and also introducing a lot more people to this podcast. Yeah, I know a bunch of people you need to talk to, so I'll be making those introductions promptly.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dai.
Thank you.
Take care.